Good morning, everyone. I am Sugun Kwak, professor at Seoul National University. I'm really honored to participate as a moderator in this 2011 Global Human Resource Forum. This session's theme is how top global MBA schools prepare for the future challenges in businesses, industries, and economies. As MBA education is globally expanding fast to emerging market, global competition and cooperation among MBA programs is getting more important. In this session, we invited the deans of major business schools and discuss how their global MBA programs came to establish competitiveness and what kinds of efforts they are making to enhance their competitive advantage in this radically changing global environment. Let me introduce four speakers of this session. To save time, I would not introduce their backgrounds in details. Please refer to the attached materials. First, I would like to introduce Dean Santiago Iniguez, Business School in Spain. Please welcome him with a big hands. Next speaker is President Pedro Nueno, the founder of China Europe International Business School. Please welcome him with a big hand. The Dean Judy Olian, the UCLA Anderson School of Management. Please welcome her with a big hand. The last speaker is Dean Byung-tae Lee, the Dean of KAIST College of Business. 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. As you may know, today's speakers are worldwide well-known leaders in business education. Thus, we can learn much from their presentations and discussions. However, we have time constraint. Actually, 9 minutes are given to us, and this session is to be closed by 10:30, but we already used up 10 minutes almost. So I have to allocate our time. I suggest that each speaker use 15 to 20 minutes, preferably 15 minutes, but not exceeding 20 minutes. And then we could have another 15 minutes for Q&A session and discussions. I will receive questions from floor, and then I will give some other questions I prepared if we have time left. Dean Iniguez will speak first. He will present on the global trends and major issues of global MBA education. Please welcome him again.
안녕하세요. Good morning, and thanks very much for inviting me to participate in this panel. I'm very happy to be here. What I'll do, given the time constraints, is I'll probably cover during my presentation only the first part that I prepared. But then you can find all the slides available in the website of the conference. And of course, I'm available to any request or any question that may come afterwards via email or Twitter. Many of the thoughts that I'm going to share with you this morning are collected in this recently published book, The Learning Curve, which is available in the website thelearningcurvebook.com, and that just was published by Palgrave Macmillan. So my first part, I'm going to focus probably more on the diagnosis than on the recommendations. But my first part deals with a sort of analysis of the trends in business education among business schools on a global basis. So I'm going to share with you 7 different trends or features that are common to business schools all over the world. The first one is that business education is not mature, but rather we see some business schools that are mature. You're probably familiarized with the product life cycle curve, which is this tool, management tool, mostly used at business schools, that resembles the developments of life. It's an anthropomorphic sort of tool. And according to this management device, products or services go along this sort of curve through a number of stages until they reach maturity and afterwards decline. So many analysts of our industry are wondering whether the MBA program, the traditional MBA program, may be currently in a state of maturity. Is it really in that phase of development? Well, let me share with you a statement which resonates in my ears, many times when I hear these judgments about the maturity of industries. Along with John Stopford, the leading strategist, I believe that there are no mature industries, but only mature companies. There are always ways to renovate industries, to reinvent the products, to revamp the services. And in fact, if you follow the different phases that management education has passed over the last decades, you may see that management education has been under attack or under criticisms a number of times. Look at this article, for example, in the New York Times of 1992, MBA's dim outlook this spring, or this other one, which was, more strong, The End of Management in the Washington Post, 1993, The End of Business Schools in Wall Street Journal only some years afterwards. You probably recall Henry Mintzberg's criticisms towards business schools and the MBAs. And more recently, other articles in the New York Times and Business Week. So every 2 to 5 years, we attend a revision or a criticism of business schools, of MBA programs. This is a normal thing because our industry, our sector is very dynamic, and it attracts the attention and the analysis of many outsiders and insiders. So how can we actually go beyond maturity? These are 3 pieces of advice. The first one is that we extend at our business schools the family of the MBA programs. So maybe the traditional 2-year face-to-face MBA program is mature, but there are many other forms of MBAs, executive MBAs with blended formats, with specializations that are still growing very fast. Of course, we still need to attract an increasing number of women to our MBAs. If we compare, the percentage of women in full-time MBAs is very small as compared to other degrees in very demanding careers like medicine or architecture or law. And a third recommendation, there's still a need to further internationalize the MBA class. Many MBA programs still have very low proportions of international students. The second trend, I believe that we are attending the age of the university-based full-service business schools versus the traditional independent schools as they were created in the past. You probably remember that even Harvard Business School was founded on the other side of the Charles River. So it was detached from the actual operations of the college, of Harvard College. And this has been the way at many other universities. In Europe, for example, most of the business schools were founded as independent institutions by companies, by institutions or associations. But I guess that we are, these years, attending sort of going back to the roots of business schools within universities. And we see, for example, the case of Warwick, whose dean has stated recently that they want to become a leading university-based business schools, or look, for example, at Oxford, Said Business School, where, of course, belonging to a long-established university provides many opportunities to business schools. So how can university-based business schools benefit from belonging to a wider organization? At least in 3 different ways. First, by running more cross-disciplinary courses. And we are seeing, for example, MBAs specialized by industries in the healthcare or the real estate, or double degree programs, law and business, or, of course, we are seeing that MBA programs are also focusing on the development of multiple forms of intelligence. So there's a lot to gain from this combination of business schools with other departments and schools within the university. Third trend, competition is becoming multipolar. And in order to become global, you need to have a presence, even physical presence, in major markets. So it's not just, a question of being in a country and serving a given region, but actually of covering different continents. I'm going to use the example of INSEAD, which is probably a reference of a globalized school with campuses in different continents, in Europe, in Asia, in Singapore, in Abu Dhabi, in the Middle East. Now with an alliance in the US, the INSEAD team has announced recently whether they were opening new campuses abroad. So this is one of the models to establish international presence abroad. Another case, you probably heard of Yale University opening a campus in alliance with National University Singapore. I took this piece of the Atlantic because it's a very interesting one. It's actually a critical piece on this movement. And I very much agree, with the author of the article who says that we should leave great Asian universities to create their own business schools. So instead of actually opening campuses abroad, what I actually defend is the establishment of strategic alliances. This is the way that my school, for example, has developed its presence overseas. So let me just mention two. My school, for example, runs an executive MBA program with Brown University. We believe this is a perfect synergy. They provide us with high quality, excellent courses on the humanities, and we bring them courses on business and management. But there are many other alliances in the sector, not just, in terms of exchanging students, but also running joint programs, double degree programs, and many other offerings. We will not only see alliances, but also mergers. And this was a word which was sort of forbidden formally in academia. Talking about mergers among universities was something like, not heard in our sector. But we are already attending some mergers, for example, in Europe. And here are 5 different mergers that were implemented in the past 5 years. Still, most of them are inside the same national borders. So we still have to see more cross-border mergers in the future. Another trend, I believe that we are on the eve of a big explosion of blended programs of online offerings. We will see new innovative forms of integrating pedagogy and technology. If you look, for example, at the map provided by the Financial Times of blended and online programs over the world, you will realize that these sorts of programs are growing very fast. So those of you who want to internationalize the activities of your schools, I would recommend that you also look at the opportunities that technologies bring to run blended programs in other continents. Let me just mention one recent case of a leading school, Wharton, which has entered this segment of online blended programs with the Center for Creative Leadership to run executive education programs here in Asia. And the 7th trend that I wanted to share with you is the fact that we are attending reforms in higher education, which means that we'll probably see the cut in the investment by governments in education. We are already attending this phenomenon, for example, in Europe or in the Americas. You probably realized, you probably attended these riots that occurred in London only 1 year ago when the coalition government, chaired by Prime Minister Cameron, implemented a number of reforms in higher education, among them the increase of tuition fees by 300%. Of course, students, went to the streets. I would have done the same, actually. Again, we see in Chile riots because there, even if the quality of higher education is very high, the prices, the tuition fees are also very high. So students are actually demanding from the government a change in the system. So we will probably see, particularly in the Western world, many reforms in higher education linked to cut in expenses, in investment in education. So this will have a number of consequences. For example, higher tuition fees. This is something inevitable, but this will be probably accompanied with more scholarships by both private and public institutions. We will also attend the growth of part-time and online programs because people will need to combine their dedication to their programs with maybe some internships or some work in order to raise money and cover their expenses. And finally, we will also see the shortening of the duration of programs. Probably not in a very future time, we will see that bachelor degree programs will be shortened to a 2-year duration. Maybe master's degree programs will become a 6-month duration. This is, something that is imposed by the circumstances and by the prices of higher education in many different countries. So one conclusion from this analysis of the different trends in higher education, the need of differentiation. This is the only way to compete on a global scale. Business schools, your business schools, need to become differential at a global level. So I guess I'll stop here because I have prepared a second section, but I'm not sure whether I'm still, I still have some minutes to go. Should I continue or should I stop
2
here?
or 3 minutes? How about briefly into the 2 or 3 minutes?
Okay,
Yeah,
2 minutes?
yeah.
Okay, let me just run through the coming slides. I will just mention, some of the suggestions for higher education institutions in order to cope with this changing environment. First one, we need a new type of faculty, which I call kangaroos. Not just gurus, people who produce wise knowledge, but people who can jump from research into the classroom and into the interface with the top management. That's why I call this very special sort of faculty kangaroo. Second advice, we need to bridge the academia, which is the world for the generation of knowledge, and the agora, the world of business. And research needs to be more clinical, needs to address the real problems of the world. Third recommendation, we need to renovate the curriculum of MBA and other management programs. And my suggestion is that we truffle that curriculum with the humanities. We need to develop, we need to grow cosmopolitan managers, global citizens. We also need to identify different forms of intelligence, not just, the traditional analytical intelligence, which is the one that normally education measures and promotes, but many other forms of intelligence which are more important for success in real life, like emotional, artistic, relational, and others. And finally, I think we need to reinforce a social commitment in managers and also cultivate something which is a classical idea, what I call the managerial virtues. Every educational institution in the past has tried to instill in students some given virtues. So what I contend is that we need to instill in managers those managerial virtues, those that can make them become not just better business people, but also better citizens, better professionals. Okay, so you are invited to come to iBusiness School if you come to Madrid or to our campus in Segovia, which is a wonderful monastery of the 13th century. In any case, thanks very much. Gamsa Hamnida, and I'm open for your questions afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. He mentioned that MBA programs are competing and cooperating and evolving and then changing in this world. And then he concluded that MBA program has to has to have its own unique feature to be competitive in this competing in this world. And then he also suggests something to be for MBA programs to be further developed. Thank you so much. And next turn be the Judy Orleans, Dean Judy Orleans. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Thank you, Professor Kwok, and everyone here. It's a pleasure to be back in Seoul, and it's always a very interesting and exciting time here. I wanted to just ask the audience, how many of you are from higher education or from business schools here? If you would raise your hands. And how many of you from the corporate world? And how many of you are current students? Okay, all right. Thank you very much for that overview. You know, I want to talk a little bit about globalization in markets and globalization in business schools and how the two are connected. And my presentation, my discussion will focus on a few points. Number one, the interconnectedness of global markets, which is also true of business schools that are becoming globalized, and the patterns of globalization are affecting how business schools attract students, attract faculty, and frankly operate. I'll talk about business school trends across geographies in terms of how they're growing, applications, accreditation, and where the campuses are, what the campus strategy is. Santiago talked about these joint alliances. And then, this is a tough question, do business schools and MBA programs in particular contribute to the economic competitiveness of countries? I mean, why invest in business schools and in business school education? Is there a macro argument that would suggest that the two are linked? More business schools, more management education, more global competitiveness. I'll touch on some of the same things that Santiago mentioned about the fact that more people are questioning the return on investment on the MBA, and then briefly mention the opportunities with the technology age for delivery of education, not just in the developing world, but also in the undeveloped world. And of course, Korea is so poised to capitalize and exploit the IT revolution because you are one of the most advanced IT platforms in the world. So very quickly, some view of globalization in the economic sense, and we can talk about this from many dimensions, but if you look at this slide, you'll see that the goods and services exports are a much larger percentage of the world's global domestic product. And what that means is that the connections among markets, the exportation among markets of goods and services is becoming an increasingly important component of growth across markets. And that is even true of emerging markets, where, as you know, in Korea or in China or in Taiwan, the percent of your global gross domestic product that is devoted to exports is very high, and in fact the majority of the economy. Oops, something happened on this last slide, didn't come through. So what this slide shows is, and it doesn't show here well because there's a flat line which is a black line which mirrors the red, and the black line that mirrors the red is the US share of global domestic product. The red is Europe's share, and the blue, which is ascending, going up, is developing Asia's share of global domestic product. In other words, the share of GDP globally is really shifting now towards much greater representation from the Asian economies. This slide also shows the top 5 emerging countries by growth over the last 7 years or 6 years and estimated into 2015. And as you can see, the big gorilla is China in terms of growth relative to other countries, followed by Brazil, Russia, India, and Mexico. So in terms of growth rates, it's very clearly shifting from the developed countries to the emerging economies, and especially here in East Asia. And lastly, in terms of the macro view, okay, several slides are not coming through. Anything we can do here? I'll keep talking. The next slide is the regional percent change in GDP. And what that shows is the primary economies of the world, including the developed and the emerging economies. And it shows this huge dip in 2009 for all of these economies. And the fact is that these economies move together. When one catches a cold, the rest get pneumonia. In other words, there is no isolatable event in global markets today. Globalization has meant that with exports going in all directions and with financial institutions and global markets so connected to each other, any shock reverberates throughout all of the economies. We're trying again here. Let's go back. So there, some of them are blank, not coming through. No, we need to go back. Does anyone want the other USB again? Sorry about that. We'll try and reboot them. So the last slide on the macroeconomic environment is that when there are shocks, they're no longer isolatable. Every major economy is connected to every other major economy, and they all move in tandem. But if you look at the 2009 crisis, 2008-9 crisis, what you'll see is that the emerging economies actually weathered this a little better than the established economies. The ASEAN 5 and the newly industrialized Asian economies were hurt less. Everyone took a huge dip. Here we go. No, back. Yeah, that was the one. That was the one. But you went too far forward. Could we go to slide number 4? Okay. So this was the previous slide that I showed about how Europe and the United States are in a downward trend, and how developing Asia is in an upward trend in terms of the percentage of the global domestic production. The next slide shows, This is the slide I was just talking about, where you can see the ASEAN and the newly industrialized economy actually dipped a little less than did the major advanced economies and the European Union, the red and the blue, which are the most extreme dips during the global financial crisis. But still, none are isolatable. They are all, in fact, in this contagious environment together. Now, having established the fact that we are in a global economy that's extremely interconnected, both in terms of crises and in terms of exports, let's turn to the landscape for higher education. This is U.S. higher education industry changes in the macro sense of the word. And the traditional higher education deliverers have been public universities, like actually UCLA or Berkeley, or the University of Wisconsin or Ohio State. Those are public institutions, and you'll see that in the period of the last decade, the percent of the industry has declined in public higher education. Private nonprofits like Harvard, Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, or MIT or Brown, also their share of the industry has declined. And what is increasing, and I see this also as a global trend, is private for-profit institutions, which are publicly traded institutions that are becoming more and more of a go-to place to get your education, in part because they offer price advantages, in part because they offer delivery convenience. Many of them are hybridized or online models of education. Many of them are more specifically vocational. And so when we think about higher education, we have to recognize that the delivery is becoming more fragmented. And this is a trend that you'll see all over the world, that when the big universities don't meet a niche need, they will be replaced by for-profit, more nimble institutions, some of which are very high quality and some of which are very poor quality. So the buyer has to be much more discerning. When we go to management education, and these are just changes over the last 2 or 3 years, this is ASCSB data, you can see that in total we now have almost 13,000 business schools in the world. And the growth is really happening in Asia in terms of the numbers. Europe is fairly stagnated. In the Americas, it's marginally growing. In Africa, on a percentage base, it's growing, but still the numbers are so small relative to the need and demographics of those countries. So even here, you can see haves and have-nots, but clearly the explosive growth is happening in Asia. In Korea, and the professors here can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that there are 14 university-based MBA programs. Not a lot of growth here in Korea, but there may be some for-profits and other forms of development. But I will rely on my colleagues on the panel. But in China and India in particular, explosive growth of some good providers and some very poor providers, but again addressing demand. If you look at the feeders into management education, and to get into a major business school, you have to take this one test, either the SAT, but most commonly it's called the GMAT. And those that take it are indicating an intention to go into an MBA program. If you look here, there's a real shift in where students are intending to go into MBA programs. First of all, there's a decline in US-based intentionality to go into MBA programs. Secondly, the darker blue is Asia. Great increase in the number of test takers who are indicating intention to go into MBA programs, and third, the rest of the world. But there's clearly a shift in where, in the demand function for MBA programs away from the mature world. And here is a very clear data point, and that is you can see a significant decline in the number of Asian test takers submitting their test scores to US schools. In other words, if I want to go to a school, I have to send them the GMAT test score that I have. If I'm sending it to an Asia school, I'm showing intention to enroll in Asia. And you can see here there's a real shift away from just going to the United States. A decline of over 17%, and in general, from other parts of the world, a decline in total of about 14%. This is a global phenomenon. This is the form of globalization that we're talking about in management higher education, away from just going in one direction. People are moving now in multiple directions. And even accreditation, accreditation means the imprimatur of quality and success, and AACSB is, if not the primary, one of the top two forms of accreditation. You can see here there's explosive growth in first the people that sign on as members, and then in the number that actually get accreditation. That's the difference between the red line, which is membership, and the black line, which is actual accredited, but explosive growth in non-US members. So we're seeing globalization take the form of much greater diversity in the location of business schools. Now, this is not distributed equally. If you look here at the distribution of schools with accreditation from either ACSB, EQUIS, or AMBA, what you'll see is that it's still concentrated in the developed economies. Part of it is that developed economies tend to unleash greater demand for education. There's a circular effect here that also better business schools probably help development of economies, and I'll show you that later. But there's also a cost here. To get accredited, you have to have a faculty that can be accredited. You have to have certain standards. And some of the developing countries and emerging economies simply don't have the resources to enable them to get accreditation. But when you talk about globalization of management education, this trend towards accreditation will be part and parcel of the globalizing trend of management education. We're also seeing migration of some schools to create satellite campuses. Santiago talked about the fact that that's a difficult model, and I happen to agree that that's a difficult model, but the total number of countries represented here on this side that have, I'm sorry, not countries, campuses that have campuses abroad. For example, Duke University establishing a campus in Shanghai, or NYU establishing a campus in Dubai. There are a total of 161 countries, campuses represented that have gone and established satellites outside of their home country, but it's highly concentrated in just a very few countries. The United Arab Emirates, the various Emirates, Qatar, Canada, and China have a few. Singapore, the little country that Singapore is, has quite a number of campuses, satellite campuses, including Chicago and INSEAD. So there is also a trend towards globalization that's reflected in establishment of global campuses outside of the host country. Now, there's a question of whether you can associate economic success with the presence of business schools. And I'm very careful about my language here. And the question is, do business schools contribute to the economic competitiveness of countries? Do economically competitive countries tend to breed or create more management education? And there is clearly a circular argument, and it's supported by this slide. This is a slide that comes from the Davos Economic Forum. Every year they do an executive survey of about 15,000 executives, and they have some objective data, and they create a very complicated matrix and come up with a global competitive index by country. Rather than look at where each country is, what you need to see is the pattern. And the pattern is diagonal, which suggests that there is a correlation between the presence of quality management education in a country and the global competitiveness of that country. I caution any kind of causality attributions. There isn't. It's highly circular. But more developed countries pay more attention to management education. Management education also increases the professionalization of management and how organizations are run. And this is what this slide demonstrates. Similarly, this slide demonstrates a relationship between global competitiveness and innovation capacity. And this is some of what we teach. I mean, we teach about how to innovate. Now, innovation capacity also includes investment in R&D, how many engineers and scientists are in a country. but it's also the entrepreneurial mindset, which is what we teach. Again, a connection and association between the health of economies of countries and capacity for innovation. And lastly, a connection, a correlation, an association between the ethical behaviors of firms and the global competitiveness of countries. Where you have rampant corruption, where you have a lack of law and order in business practices, global competitiveness suffers because companies are uncomfortable, global companies are uncomfortable doing business there. Again, this is something we teach, and it is an opportunity that ultimately may have an impact on the macroeconomic environment of the nation in which you're operating, and ultimately on globalization and global competitiveness. So those are all positive developments, I think, around business schools and their globalization efforts. Some cause for concern that also echoes Santiago's points, remarks. If you look here, and we just had somebody, Ogilvy and Mather, a big global firm, do a survey for us. This is US-based, to ask students why they come to MBA programs. And you'll see here that there's a pretty basic desire, and that's to build salary, to increase their salary, to build new skills, to move up. So it's very much career orientation around why they come to management education. And remember, we said management education is important for the health of economies. Well, if you look at this slide, what has happened globally is that the cost of management education has gone up much more rapidly than any kind of returns on management education. This is from The Economist. The returns are narrowing, which of course may mean why, especially in developed countries like the United States, there is a threat or there is a concern about going into management education. If I want to increase my salary and move up in my career and the returns on my investment are declining, I may not choose that. I may rely just on experience. And so the cost factor in management education may become an inhibitor in terms of demand for that kind of education. As part of our survey, we also asked recruiters why hire an MBA. And you can see here that they believe that the MBAs are goal-oriented, motivated, technology-savvy, hit the ground running. Those are all the pluses. But the minuses, and there is concern about even to recruiters the value of an MBA, there's less clear-cut return to recruiters of the skill set that MBAs have. They no longer have expertise in math and statistics. They look for experience that almost dominates whether or not somebody has an MBA. And they're also concerned that MBAs today are not as well prepared to hit the ground running as they were before in terms of their preparation for the real world or communication skills. So between the ROI that students perceive and the ROI that recruiters perceive, there may be a real concern here about continuing investment in management education. I do want to mention what I see as a huge opportunity, and that is technology, and especially a country like Korea, which is so advanced in its technology infrastructure. The explosive growth of reliance on the internet and the capabilities of transmission and delivery of information through the internet to underserved areas is something that management education must embrace, not just to increase the reach, but also to reduce the costs of management education, because as we said, that's a real concern. So we're seeing year-over-year growth of 10 to 20% in terms of internet users. There's a real shift to smartphones and tablets for delivery of information, and that again makes access to information much more ubiquitous or available. The dominant platforms are social, mobile, and search. And we expect global mobile traffic to grow by 26 times over in the next 5 years. Imagine what that'll do, for example, for the reach across a country like Korea. You don't have to go anywhere. You can use your mobile telephone. Imagine what it will do to Africa in terms of leapfrogging the need for infrastructure and providing management education to everybody who has a handphone, a smartphone. And that's a huge opportunity. It's also a challenge because our traditional modes of delivery are just not as attractive to students who are coming in the millennial age, who are the new students, who are so used to getting information, not like I'm talking to you today, but on their iPhone. Very quickly, our global strategy at UCLA Anderson is to provide students with global brains through many, many opportunities, not any single silver bullet. We've made a choice of our regional focus being Latin America and Asia. We're on the Pacific Rim, being in California, and we're also on the Latin American Rim. We have joint alliances, 2 joint alliances, one in Latin America and one in Asia. Immersion trips, global requirements, global entrepreneurial requirements, but it's also part of our public mission to reach out internationally with our students and faculty. And we use social media and the internet to expand the reach of our programs, also with our alumni. So let me just finish with one slide of my observations. First of all, in this globalization of not just markets, but also of business schools, the action, just like in markets, is in the countries with emerging, fast-growing economies. That's where markets are growing. That's where business school proliferation is occurring. Very, very fast growth, explosive growth there. But globalization in business school means that business students, faculty, and campuses are moving in multiple directions. It used to be that they headed in one direction, mainly to the US and some to Europe. Today, the Europeans are heading to China, the Americans are heading to China and to India, and the Chinese are staying in China, the Taiwanese are coming to China, the Indians are going to Europe. It's a very complex network of connections. Globalization has been a great thing, but it has forced some of the traditional business schools to rethink what they're doing. There is an association between economic competitiveness, the availability of quality management education, the fact that people have an entrepreneurial mindset or an innovation disposition, and ethical behavior. These clusters tend to move together. And that's good for global competitiveness, to have business schools that are delivering management education with a high quality, that are delivering ways to develop entrepreneurial thinking and ethical behavior. But as much as we encourage management education as maybe a correlate of global competitiveness, there are some real questions about the return on investment on the MBA. It's lost its bloom a little, so we have to make it more relevant and we have to make it more affordable. And social and mobile media technology offer challenges and opportunities. We can both lower the cost and we can reach many more people through these technologies, and we can do it probably in some ways better than we have been doing it in the past. And lastly, what you saw in that slide which showed where business schools are growing, Africa is underserved, it remains underserved, and we have to think about some of the emerging economies and underserved economies of the world and think of new ways of educating those communities for sophisticated management of organizations, because that's what's going to lift them out of their poverty. That's what's going to build institutions. And we have an obligation as management educators to use all the tools at our disposal to exercise that public mission. With that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Dean Judy Olian. The Dean Olian showed big pictures on global trends in business education. The next presentation to be made by President Pedro Nueno. Please welcome him with big hands. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. Yeah, we appear in the screen. On Monday will be the 17th birthday of CEIBS, China Europe International Business School, that was born the 7th of November of 1994. So my area of interest, of academic interest, is entrepreneurship. So all my students have to write business plans. Sometimes I have to do that also. And I did it in the summer of 1994, writing the business plan of CIBS that I had to submit to the mayor of Shanghai the 7th of November. So it was approved, and that day we started with a little money that I got from the European Union and a piece of land in Pudong in Shanghai that I got from the government of Shanghai. Really, in those years, in Pudong, where today you have these fantastic tall buildings and all of this, there was nothing. So there was mud. That was all. So can we just pass the following one? So this is a view of the school today, the entrance, another one. This is the library. I am basically, I started my PhD at Harvard in management, but prior to this, I studied engineering and architecture, and I have always been a frustrated architecture. So when I wanted to build this school, I looked for what I thought one of the best architects of the world, I.M. Pei. They were famous for having built the pyramid, the Louvre pyramid. But the thing is that this architect had made an expansion at UCLA. At the time that a classmate of mine from Harvard, José de la Torre, was there. So you see how small is the world. We are sitting together here, and I got the inspiration from UCLA because José de la Torre, my classmate, showed me the expansion, and I said, well, my classmate has already probably taught this architect how to build a business school, so I will not have to do that. So I just went for the design. Can we have the next one? You see how beautiful is the campus. Next one. Well, this is the model that consumed basically all the money I had in 1994. He charged $250,000 for this model of the school. I asked I.M. Pei that I wanted something mixing European culture and Chinese culture. And he said, well, Chinese important buildings are a set of buildings looking towards the inside where there is a pond. And he said all European universities had a cloister. So all the buildings are linked by a cloister. There is a pond in the middle and a building in the pond, which is the library. Then the buildings you see on the left hand side are the dormitories, and then the other groups are Academic Center 1, Academic Center 2, Academic Center 2. So a combination of classroom, discussion rooms, faculty offices, and things like that. So that was the dream. But we started the school. I'll show you. We started with an MBA, of course, 40 students or something like that. Immediately an executive MBA in a rented facility, of course. And only 4 years later, when the thing was going as a private organization, then we built this campus. We have the next one. Then 2 years ago, we opened this fantastic campus in Beijing. also using a famous architect. We have also a campus in Shenzhen that for the moment is rented, but we are going to build our own campus in Shenzhen in the south. Can we have the next one? 3 years ago, I launched a branch of the school in Africa. So this is the day I was opening the African, so next one. This is my fabulous team of management in Africa. Next one. This is the first class of Africa visiting, because some of the modules they do in Shanghai. And another one, this is the first graduation in Africa. So the newspapers around the world tend to say that the Chinese go to Africa to spoil everything, to get minerals, to get. But whenever I have a celebration in Africa, it's a graduation or anything like that, all the class members express their gratitude to China. So the Africans like the fact that China goes to Africa, because at the end it's creating jobs. I invited for a speech that lady, the president of Liberia. Lady, I invited her last year. She got the Nobel Prize this year. She was in an audience, and she identified the management of ArcelorMittal that were listening there, and she said, look, these guys, they have invested 1.6 billion euro in my country. In 20 years, I will have no iron ore, but in these 20 years, they will create lots of jobs. So that was the president of one African country. Okay, when we think about a business school, you need to have a clear strategy. Well, like the Harvard Business School, for instance, is what I was asking there. Probably, it's a famous one. It's my alma mater, so, being like the Harvard Business School could be an objective. We are not like the Harvard Business School, but we try to just follow up many of the things that this 100-year-old leading institution have created. For example, in terms of programs, we have, obviously, we started with the MBA, next one. We follow with the Executive MBA. Executive MBA, as you know, is a program for people who already have maybe 10 years of experience or something like that, and it's a kind of part-time MBA. Then we follow with executive education, and in executive education you have different programs like an AMP, PMD programs, or CEO, call in different ways, but programs addressed to the top managers of a company or to the second levels. Then you might have the focus program that, you hit all of these guys dressing in the same way. A focus program is a program on a topic. So it could be a marketing program or a finance program or a program on mergers and acquisition or a program on cultural management. And then, last one, you can have company-specific programs. So the company tells you, look, we have made an acquisition and we want to integrate the two cultures of the company and also put a bit more of pressure on marketing aspects. So you have to design a program that meets specific needs of that particular company. So basically, this is what you find in the portfolio of a developed business school, the MBA, the Executive MBA, Executive Education, which has these three levels of people, open programs, as they call them, general, then focus on a certain area, or made specific for one company. So if you look at this different program, the MBA, the MBA is a program that loses money. So let me now just be president of a business school. So with the MBA, you lose money. Why you lose money? You lose money because you tend to attract the best students in the world, and sometimes these people cannot fully pay for the tuition, the travel expenses, the living expenses, but you still want to have the best people. So this means that you have to help some of them. So I would say that most business schools end up losing money in a relevant way with the MBA. Also, this program is anti-cyclical. What this means is, for example, when the financial crisis produced so many layoffs in Wall Street, many people said, well, now this is going to be quite slow for a couple of years. Let's go and make an MBA. So to use the time. So it's when the job market is boiling, people sometimes have the temptation of finishing university and going into the job market. So it's somewhat anti-cyclical. And as I said, well, the MBAs tend to be full-time. The executive MBA, this is a strong program, makes money, because this program is addressed to people who are already employed in a company, tends to be a part-time company. These guys have experience, and also tend to be more stable, because many of these people, they say, either I do now this MBA that I didn't do when I was younger, because I jumped immediately in the job market, or I will not do it ever in my life. So I'm going to do it now. And they make the commitment. And then even in crisis periods, you see that these executive MBAs tend to be doing well in all over the world. At least that is my observation in these last couple of years. That is quite stable. Then I also mentioned here the faculty. For an MBA, you need to have a full-time faculty. So you see schools can use full-time and part-time faculty. So particularly new schools tend to use some part-time faculty. The MBA requires full-time. The executive MBAs can have some part-time faculty. The open programs make money, but they are quite cyclical. So the people who go to an open program tend to be paid by the company, and when there is crisis, companies send emails around. This is what I call management by email, saying, well, cut for education, cut advertising, cut hirings, cut. So I saw many managers of multinational companies in China very, very upset when these emails came from headquarters saying, well, they might have problems in America or in Europe, but here we are booming, so how can we cut hirings, how can we cut? So it took a few months for them to correct this kind of thing, but anyway, faculty can be also mixed, and then company-specific programs, again, they also make money. They are very cyclical, so companies tend to just cut even more on this. And again, you can use mixed faculty, because sometimes you look for somebody who is an expert on something, and sometimes that person may be coming up from another business school. So you go to the next. Well, let's criticize a bit the faculty now that, well, they are not here, most of them. So let's keep this confidential, okay? So faculty, you have people who are value-oriented. These are the guys who enjoy meeting the students outside the class, meeting the students afterwards when they are alumni, and they remember them, and they pay attention to what they do, and they give advice, and they seem to be happy every time you approach them. And then you have, on the opposite side, what I call the how-muchers. The how-muchers are the faculty that you tell, John, I need, and they say, how much? How much? No, how much would you pay? So for everything they do, they want to know how much they are going to get. So they count everything. So just I moderated a session with, so you have to count the session. So this is the extreme. Another is the project enthusiast. You see, well, we are going to launch a new campus. Oh, well, a new campus. Oh, that's fantastic. Can I go there and can I teach? So very open, very enthusiastic, very helpful, very versus, again, those who are opportunity freelancers. So that sometimes you want to a company to try to sell, or some of the people who are in charge of this go to a company to try to sell a company-specific program, and they find that the group of professors are already teaching a program there, and they are doing this as their own consulting. So they are, in a way, competing with the schools. So these things happen. So, of course, the faculty I have in my school are all of them value-oriented, project enthusiasts. And also the faculty of all the members of the panel. They are value-oriented and project enthusiasts. But there are other schools that don't have the same level of quality. Let's look for an identity. Okay, every school needs an identity. What is an identity? Let's go. Promoting values. Values is important in the faculty, in the students. Research versus classroom impact. So we have to reach a balance. So, of course, we need to do research. We need to incorporate all the time continuous ideas to the schools. But sometimes schools follow the kinds of things that would help them to perform better in rankings. And sometimes you see, for instance, when you see rankings, that two schools had made an alliance just to pull together the research of the two schools and have more pieces of research of those that are being valued by the rankings. Research has to be done because it enriches what is going on in the classroom. Team approach, initiative, a little bureaucracy, good example. So faculty has to give good example to students. Financial control. Management school is like any other business and has to have very good financial control. The first thing, the 5th of every month, the 5th of every month, I get a report in my school with an income statement for every program. So MBA, executive programs, the balance sheet, cash availability, like if this was a company, even faster, something that can be audited every year. So I think that you should treat this. Okay. Knowledgeable faculty, of course, let's go quickly. Knowledge about theories, frameworks in industries. How do you get that? Through research. Our school is case-oriented, so this means writing cases. Events, we organize lots of events in the automotive industry. I had it last Sunday. I had the speaker, the CEO of Volvo, for instance, the company that has been acquired, the CEO of Peugeot. So I like to organize these events. I do it in healthcare, I do it in real estate, I do it in, so that we, the faculty and the students and the alumni, we can follow industries closely. Of course, faculty had to do some consulting. Who should manage a school? A good professional, of course, a good professional. If we have a team of people, one that is doing with the MBA, another is doing with the executive MBA, another is doing with finance, another, it's better to have a good team on top, to have a team of people. This is the dean of the Harvard Business School. I think that he was elected about 1 year ago. And, well, I think that the process, he was elected from inside. He was an insider. I've seen some schools selecting a dean that came from outside, and I've seen some problems in the school because there are all of these things, all this culture, all of these things require a certain continuity. So I think that bringing somebody from inside is good. Dean Noria, he is a graduate of MIT with many years at Harvard. He is pushing for innovation. So I think it's a good idea. He's an insider using with a mixture of continuity and also permanence. So in our school in Shanghai, I mean the continuity together with some colleagues from China who have been there from the beginning, but we have been changing other positions, the dean positions, just as we have been needing facing new realities. So what can a school expect for the future? A multi-campus thing. So it has already been presented, but today I think that we cannot avoid having multi-campuses. So we have at the moment 4 in our school, but we are thinking about a 5th and maybe more than that. Of course, alliances, we have alliances with Harvard, with Wharton, with INSEAD, with many other schools. Fundraising, so the private sector should consider that helping some of these young MBAs or helping building these buildings and these things is a contribution to society, so it can fit with their own corporate social responsibility. So we are successful in getting this collaboration. Advisory boards, keeping our feet in reality. And basically, this is what I wanted to tell you, but I wanted to also express my gratitude to Young-Sun Shin, who has been helping all of us with the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, President Pedro Nueno. He showed us a clear strategy, leading CIBS to be a leading global MBA program in China. We don't have much time, but we have to know about our situation from Dean Byung-Tae. Please welcome him with a big hand.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I think my responsibility here is to present a Korean perspective. So I'll go through very fast for the generic problem of MBA programs, but more specific in Korean situations. Okay. For that purpose, first of all, this forum is to define the future MBA education. So I'll cover what kind of a business environment we are at now, and then what kind of challenges and criticism of MBA programs in general we have. I think already my colleagues presented this to some extent on this aspect. Then I'll focus on these challenges specific to Korea. And then I'll also outline the directions of innovations for what I'm pursuing at KAIST Business School. As you see that we have a big problems in terms of the integrity of business leaders when we have Enron and WorldCom. This kind of happening really question the integrity and social response of the business educations. And also in Korea, we had a foreign currency crisis in late 90s. One of the biggest lessons we learned from here is our business enterprises cannot play by domestic rules, but should follow the global standard and rules. So after that, we have been globalized in many sense. And then recently, we all know that this Occupy Wall Street protest and also global crisis, and often this is attributed to the Wall Street excessive greed. And then on the other part of the world, we have from this spring Jasmine Revolution still playing, and also Eurozone crisis and really the unpleasant acronym PIGS. Sorry. But also China become the major factor. Sometimes it has been global inflation actual price deflector as a cheap world factory. But nowadays, China become the kind of a source of inflation for global economy. And we are also aware of this climate change and sustainability of this Earth, the only planet we can live. On the other hand, on Korean side, as already Judy shows that more economic power is shifting to Asia, especially China, Japan, and Korea. And Korea has developed many global companies. The problem is the Korean companies' products are globalized, but the companies are not globalized yet, in two sense. So we have to be very careful in distinction. In the past, we had many companies from Japan and United States and Europe in Korea, but most of the Japanese companies disappeared because they failed to globalize their organizations. They depend on their own management. But the IBM, HP, once they got here, they hired the top talent and localized their management. That's how they sustained in this one. In this sense, Korean products are very popular. I traveled to India and many emerging markets. They are admired. However, they fail to recruit the top talent. So in the long run, we may question the sustainability of their global success. The other one is the most successful Korean companies are in manufacturing sectors, but manufacturing sector in Korea covers only 17% of employment. So more than almost 80% are living in service sector areas. But we haven't developed well-paying jobs in service sector areas. Their productivity is only 60% of advanced countries. So we are, in some sense, we failed to develop a domestic market based on service industries, and they are not contributing to GDP growth almost at all. That includes even education industry. And Samsung Electronics is only viable nowadays compared to the Apple smartphones. But we know that this company is the fastest copycat, but with very little disruptive innovations. So those are the, also from this development of the Wall Street and this, nowadays there maybe this development is fundamental change in market economy. Nowadays, there is a debate whether this free market is really good choice or probably old view of Polanyi is more regulated or embedded market economy is right. If you look at in the United States, it may be crash between Jeffersonian free market view versus that more strong state of Hamiltonian ideas. So from this kind of development, we don't know for sure, but we can conclude several trends. One is we have to develop new management theory that will work under uncertainty. It's also how to promote agility of the business organizations. Next thing is the IT or other technologies create so many disruptive innovations. How we can teach managers to capture big opportunities from these disruptive technologies. Third one is, of course, we have to do produce global managers with corporate responsibilities. And also, we can see that will have more control and intervention from government also, as well as non-profit NGOs. So managers should focus not only the market, but also non-market interventions. And so without such understanding, business cannot sustain in a long term. So those are the general requirements from the macro or trend. But let's look at then what kind of criticism we have received from industry regarding the MBA education. So the MBA education at the crossroad. This is the title of the book recently published by Harvard Business School. Basically, there was a time that if you get the MBA degree from Ivy League schools, it was a golden passport to climb the ladder in your career. High-paying jobs were guaranteed, but this is not the case anymore. And also, there is a strong trend that the declining of full-time MBAs. So, as already my colleagues mentioned, that many people question this ROI of MBA educations. Some extreme criticism say that they don't value the soft skills MBA education provide. The reason is we MBA schools or business schools developed many theories and frameworks like strategic framework and CAPM and so on. Those are very valuable theories only the schools or universities can produce. However, those teaching can be provided not only schools but by someone else. Nowadays there are many alternatives actually to such a business education can be provided. So that's why we have to pay such a big money to business schools. That's the question. So nowadays the HR managers say that they are focusing paying attention to the MBA program not because the contents, but because the big schools are the screening agency for their HR recruiting. So those are the one. This criticism actually is based on the fundamental tension in business education. Especially in the United States, business school has become one unit of universities. University is emphasizing research. So we pretended or we behaved according to the university norms, so as academic disciplines. However, business school is fundamentally vocational and professional schools. We have a similar professional schools like a law school and medical schools, but they have very homogeneous students. But in business school, we have really diverse audience. So business school education is fundamentally more difficult than any other professional schools. This book, the business MBA education at the crossroad, suggests that there are three components of learning. One is knowing component, it's knowledge. We can teach these things. But more relevant things, or what industry required, is doing component. How to apply this knowledge into practice of management. This is the heart of the practice of management. And third one is recently there's integrity or being component. This is your worldview, also your identity, your value system. Third one, we cannot ignore the third one because of this Wall Street problems and also Enron and WorldCom and all kind of business ethic problems. However, we have a very limited capability to change character or integrity in 1 year or 2 years. Probably what business schools should do for the third part is actually we may pay more attention in terms of the selection process of MBA education rather than trying to teach it. However, this knowing and doing mix, this is a big challenge to us. They list that these are the 8 areas we have to improve in business education, how to nurture the global perspectives, and how to develop the leadership skills, how to provide the skills to integrate many different disciplines or knowledges. Also, we have to teach the office politics, how to make them successful, survive through the careers by teaching them emotional intelligence and network skills and all those. Also, creativity and innovation, communication skills, and goes on. These are much easier to say than to be taught. That is the reality. We have a very limited time to nurture these things. So let's look at then, these are the general criticism or challenges we face in MBA education in general. So let's look at the Korean problems now. The KAIST Business School has been pioneering this MBA education in Korea. We have been in this business for 16 years. My competitors, including Seoul National University and Yonsei Korea, they started only 4 years ago. So we have more experience in MBA educations. But in general, Korean MBA programs are have extreme unbalance between knowing and doing. Basically, mostly just providing minimal set of education on knowing part. And doing part or being part are mostly ignored. It's not because of the faculty members are not interested in doing so. Actually, our infrastructure and social support doesn't provide appropriate means for such educations. First of all, we don't have a scope and scale economies in business education, very small. And also, improve the doing part, you have to develop many extra curriculum activities like mentoring, coaching, and internship, career development coaching, and so on. However, we don't have a labor market for academic staff professionals. So most of these things are still done by faculty members. Also, there is very little infrastructure for teaching innovations. Also, because the schools are so small, just one, mostly don't have even department. So the academic community is so weak, we cannot bring top researchers or scholars to our schools. That's the problem. But what really bothers me is the next two things, actually. We have very poor support or excessive regulations from the government and society. Current structure of the compensation package really makes almost impossible to bring international faculty to Korea. Recently, the Congress kindly passed a law that the undergraduate tuition should be capped by 1.5 times of 3 years average inflation rate. Also, there is a protest for the fee, government university fee. So there is no incentive or the financial resource to encourage the education innovation in Korea. That's the problem. Third one is we don't have a stable leadership in universities. There are many different leadership and governance structure between Europe and America. However, those universities have been there for 100 years, 200 years, several hundred years. So there is very well established norms and procedures and standards. But in Korea, every rules can be arguable. And frankly, it's very shameful that I'm the 5th dean in last 5 years at KAIST Business School. So without such a stable the leadership, we cannot pursue that major strategic initiatives. Let's talk about a little bit about the global education. Global MBA program is not teaching courses in English. Actually giving the global perspectives and cultural exposure to the student. That's the global education. But most of the Korean so-called global MBA programs attract English instructors in Korea and or domestic students and teaching in English. That's not the global MBA. Actually, that really hurt the teaching effectiveness on campus. Also, some schools try to have a limited partnership with global partners like many top schools in US. However, we don't have bargaining power. Usually, dual degree program is not bilateral, it's one way. So we recruit the top student and send them. What does mean? Actually reducing our revenues. This is a marketing agency for the top schools. Also, their faculty come here, stay 2 weeks, teach one course, go away. But education always requires the commitment of faculty members. So I don't think that really works here. So given having said many things, let me briefly outline the directions I am pursuing. This is the achievement. The KAIST Business School is most research-oriented business school in Korea. Our faculty teaches only one course per semester. And we produce 140 business school faculty members for last 10 years. It's a really mecca of business faculty production. And we ranked the 13th in MI's research globally. And we ranked by 28th in open enrollment executive programs by Financial Times. Also, we are one of the top 100 full-time MBA programs by Financial Times and Aspen Institute. But what we have to do is we have to define, educate, and post-industrial area leaders. Also, we should really pursue the real globalization of education, especially partnering with these companies. Also, we have to contribute intellectually by really capturing mega trend of the business. So we define that what we produce is effective leaders, not the managers, also entrepreneurs who can create jobs. That's the definition in global environment. So we'll try to balance knowing and doing. Also, we integrate to curriculum and co-curricular activities. So, you know that there are many different reasons why they come to MBA programs. We profile them by their reason why they come to MBA programs. And then we align curriculum with many different co-curricular activities through these 2-year careers. So we provide kind of camp guidelines, so you have to follow this. So we try to provide many different co-curricular integrations, including career coaching and leadership skill development. It includes even how to appreciate opera and table manners and so on. And the other thing is we really solve the social problems. One is that KAIST is best known, well known as a science and engineering schools. So we'll integrate with this management and technology. I see this university as one innovation process. So science and engineers produce technology, but when they create an idea, they have to see a market, what the people want. That's market sensing. But after they create the technology or product, we have to commercialize them. So first step of the science and technology is a business area. Last stage of the science and technology also business area. So how you combine that? Also, not only focus on the manufacturing sector, we are providing specialized MBAs, finance MBA, information and media MBA. So we address these more diverse service-oriented industries. Those are the trends to differentiate our curriculums. Also, in terms of globalization, globalization takes globalization of student body, globalization of faculty, globalization of staff, and also society. I just briefly introduced one success story. Hyoseong Group gave a full scholarship for our MBA students from the developing countries, India and China. They come here with the full scholarship, with the living stipend. But during the 2 stay, they provide also internship. After 2-year education, they have guaranteed jobs at the headquarters. And then after 2 or 3 years of the headquarters training, they go back to their own country. So during that, they do kind of a cultural sanitization in Korea so that they can overcome the cultural barrier and language barriers as well. Also, I bring the Korean Americans, Korean Canadians, Korean Australians here because there is a hope, wish from their parents to teach both culture, but they don't come to Korea because of the KAIST brand or Seoul National, Yonsei University brand. So I formed a partnership with the big schools, including IE in here, in Spain. So when they come here after 1-year MBA, they can go to the partner school for another degrees. And those are the globalization. But I haven't found the solution how to globalize our faculty yet because I have to deal with the government and society support. Once Mrs. Hillary Clinton wrote the book, It Takes a Village, that any kids' education need a community support. I copy that to you. Even MBA education takes a global village, community support. That includes NGOs and government and society and also global partners. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dean Lee. I have failed to control time, and then we have only 10 minutes to start the next session. We have cut down the coffee time break for already 20 minutes. So, but already all the audience have stayed all the way, and I get 1 or 2 quick questions from the floor. Then we don't have any question from the floor, so we have to conclude this session. I really appreciate the renowned leaders in business world, business education, and we could learn much from today's session. So I really appreciate all 4 speakers. Thank you so much.
네, 수고해주신 곽수근 한국경영학교 회장님과 소중한 강연을 해주신 연사, 토론자분들께 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 이것으로 첫 번째 세션 순서를 마치도록 하겠습니다.